Hey guys, Illusion Amana here, and today we're going to learn about making low poly models and as well as texturing and UV mapping for low polys. So this will be useful for if you are into just wanting to make something that looks like retro games like on the PlayStation or Nintendo 64, or if you're into making games or anything really that requires 3D graphics for low performance devices like phones or mobile, and so on. So sit back, relax, and enjoy these tutorials. Follow along and feel free to share whatever you make at the end of them. I'd love to see them. The last thing I want to say before we get started is big fat thanks to Cuppa Joe and Tofu Pixel for inspiring me to do these tutorials. And yeah, let's get started. Hello guys, what's up and welcome back. So this tutorial we're going to talk about how to UV edit and get textures set up for our object. Now this tutorial isn't going to cover how to do pixel art, any kinds of those textures, but what we will be covering is how to apply that texture to an object, how to break up our object into different parts so that when we do our UV, it all looks seamless and cohesive and nice. So if you've got your scene already open, what we're going to do is we're going to move from either layout or modeling to UV editing. And that's going to give us these two viewports. So we want to set up our scene for our new texture and for our UVs. Now, I already have a texture made, and that will be provided in the downloads if you want to follow the tutorial using my Blender scene and my provided textures. But this will also cover how to set yourself up so that you can make your own textures and export your own UVs as well. So the first thing I want to do is in object mode, I'm going to just select one object for right now. We can start with our cup and go down to this orb down here in the control panel on the right hand side. So this orb is our material properties. And what I want to do is make a new material. It's already got a default one on, but it's better to just create a new material for your object. So we're going to click this little X by the material name. And we're going to press new. And it's going to give us a new material with the name material.001. And we're going to rename it. This one is going to be called texture underscore matte. You could also be a little bit more specific and go like ramen, which I think might be a better name for this. Underscore matte, just give it the same name as your object. With the underscore matte, just kind of tells you when you see it that this is a material. So the next thing I want to do is I want to link a texture. So down here, under all of our material settings, there is a base color setting with a little yellow dot next to it. We're going to click that yellow dot. It's going to bring up this sub menu. And what I want to do is load up an image texture. So here I've got a new prompt right here, open new, and then this little icon right here. We want to open up a new texture. And it's going to bring up our prompt. So I got to go find it. For me, it's going to be on the desktop, but for you it might be wherever you have your project save file at. Or if you don't have one, then no worries, you won't need it just yet. I'm going to find our ramen project file, and I'm going to find our texture, ramen texture. I'm going to open that image. So now that it's loaded in, we don't really see it on any of our previews yet, but what we can do, and I'm going to just stretch this out a bit so that I can see all of the options up here at the top right of our viewport. Up here at the top right, you'll notice there are these 4 spheres or circles. We want this filled in one selected. Then we want to go to this drop down all the way at the end of that and press flat and texture. And you can keep outline on if you want. I turned it off just because it's not necessary. But the next thing we'll notice is everything is kind of looking really bad at the moment. That's because there are no UVs applied to this. But also it's looking like an N64 game over here. and that might be the style that you want to convey, but for me, that's not the vibe. I like those chunky pixels. So I'm going to actually turn off the filtering. So back over here in our material, there is a setting under the texture file prompt that says linear right here. It's the first setting, should be at least. And we're going to set it to closest, and that's going to remove that filter for us. Part of our object did look like it disappeared though. So at this point, I recommend going over into your settings up here, your render settings. And this time, instead of going over to the render circles over here, we're going to go over to one of these drop downs, this one right here. And this is our overlay drop down. We're just going to select wireframe under geometry. That way we can see our object regardless of if it's UV mapped or not. And of course, you can always just go over here and turn texture back to material, and it'll turn everything back to white. But for us, we want to see the material as we remap it. So we're going to also apply this material to our chopsticks as well. So when we click on them, we're going to go to our material orb, and then we're going to bring this drop down next to new and go to ramen material. Do that for every object in our scene. So everything is ready with a texture, but they're not set totally for UV just yet. So the next thing we want to do is set up the texture over here so we can see where we're UV mapping. So up here, there's going to be another little drop down. This time it's going to look like a little image icon. We want to select our texture so it's loaded into our 2D viewport space. There we go. So here we have all the textures that we need for a ramen cup. And I think going forward from here, it's best to always start working with the most obvious stuff. So for me, the most obvious stuff are like identifying like, oh, I can tell this is the noodle pool. I can tell this is the a label of some kind. And because of its round shape, it most likely belongs onto the lid label. And then of course, we can see this long ribbon of two duplicates of the same label. That looks like it's for the cup too. If you're making your own though, you can actually use this layout to get a good idea of how you should set up your texture for when you do UV mapping. Is to basically just draw your objects into places that look and into shapes that look like they roughly match your object. Of course, we will be talking about how to export a UV map when we have it set up, so that you can draw on top of that UV map and get objects that are right where they should be and at the shape that they should be. But if you want to just get jump started and generally have an idea of where you're going, then obviously you can do a vague layout like this. So UV mapping in low poly is pretty repetitive, and it's roughly the same simple steps throughout almost every object that you're going to use, at least in Blender, or that you're going to UV. So I'm going to select all of the objects in our scene, so our two chopsticks and our cup. I'm going to go up here to our object mode tab. I'm going to go down into edit mode. So if you remember this from our modeling tutorial, you'll know that edit mode has these settings, the vertex mode, the edge mode, and the face mode. We want face mode selected. This is the only mode we're going to be working in. We're not going to be dealing with any of the tools right here, or any other things other than selecting faces and mapping UVs. So the first thing that I want to do is let's actually pose our ramen. I think that's a good fun starting point. So I'm going to select the top of our ramen right here, and I think I'm going to select the ring around our ramen cup as well. We're just going to select all of the faces. Now if you have a hard time seeing any of that stuff, like I said, feel free to change your render settings back to material so that you can see your selections better. But I like to keep it on texture. That way I can see how the texture moves whenever I do my changes. So I'm just going to select some top and bottom textures of just about everything. That way I don't have to do multiple steps for the same UV map. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to our gimbal right here. I'm going to I'm going to click this this Z right here. That way we get this top-down orthographic view of our setup. We can show a little bit more space right here. We're going to go under UV right here. And then we're going to project from view. So that looks pretty nice, but it's a little bit of a mess at the moment. And the only thing I can really tell what's where is the top and bottom of the chopstick. So I'm going to select those and move them over. Remember, this is very similar to our 3D workspace, where we have 3 main tools that we mainly use to manipulate objects in. We've got a move tool, a rotate tool, and a scale tool. But we have another tool that's a little bit more useful here than it is over there, and that's the transform tool. And what that does is it essentially gives us a little bit of every tool. It lets us rotate our object. It lets us scale our object, as you can see there. And it also lets us move it around. But what I mainly like using it for is scaling to a corner instead of using the current scale tool, which scales from the center. So just keep that in mind. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually deselect our ramen interior and only keep the outside, this top ring and the floor, the bottom of our ramen cup selected, because I know these are going to be solid colors. I'm going to select that transform tool again. I'm just going to shrink them down a little bit and bring them into this color circle. And then I can reselect our ramen and do the same thing, but this time I'm going to put it in our ramen pool over here. And you'll notice that I gave it lots of space so that if we need to scale it up or down, we can do that. Or for whatever reason we want to have a different side of it displayed, we have enough wiggle room to readjust the texture as we go. So the next thing I want to do is anything else that's going to be a solid color, I want to UV map. So I'm going to take the inside ring of our ramen cup. Okay. And the inside of the lid together too. And projection angle doesn't really matter for this because it's going to be a solid color, but you know, you can pick, like I'm going to go into orthographic view and click the X here on the gimbal and do the same thing, project from view. That way I just get a nice uniform shape that once again I can scale in size. And I can put it here, I could put it down here. Like this color blotch is specifically for odd shaped objects like that. Odd shaped UVs. So now that I have that set up, I want to start working on things like the front and the back and the sides of our shape. So just like before, I'm actually going to select the front and the back of our ramen cup, just like we did with the top and the bottom. I'm going to do the same for our chopsticks. I'm going to set it up on that X view, zoom out a little bit so we can see everything. I'm going to project from view. That's going to give us these nice shapes. So for our chopsticks, I can just kind of put them in position. And of course, we can scale them up. But for our cup, this one's going to be a little bit more interesting. Now for this one, it's going to affect the front and the back. Same for our chopsticks. Our chopsticks are a vague texture, so it doesn't matter if they have the same texture on the front and the back. But our cup, it might matter to us. So for me right here, I'm going to try and position it so that the texture is where I want it on the cup. But let's say, for instance, I don't want this texture on the back, right? Instead, I want a different texture. So if I select it, just that one, I can actually move it over. And in fact, if I really wanted to, I could have it be the label or label, part cover. I could even do a solid color if I really felt like it was necessary. But there's just an idea for you, is once you've got your first set of faces in position, go back and select the back faces and move those into the position you want. So we're going to do the side view next, just like this. And it's a rinse and repeat. And so what the project from view does is it gives this like very N64, very PlayStation like slight warping to the texture, but it lays it out in a way that that also kind of puts everything down neatly. And so that's the main reason that I use it, is because it it really does add into that nostalgic effect. And of course, you can use other algorithms if you know them for low poly, but I suggest if you're just getting started, just project from view. Take the time; it's worth it. So I've put our chopsticks in order, but for the cup, it's going to be a little bit of a different story. This time, what I want to do, I want to try and make sure that our scale for our cup is just about right. So what I'm going to do is line up the top of our newly UV'd faces with, and I'm going to select either the front or the back, a set of faces that we've already done that are about the size that we want to be. And I'm going to make sure that only our new UV'd faces are selected over here in 2D view, but we can still see our old ones. And from there, I can actually scale and use this one as sort of a reference point for getting things started, getting things going. From there, I can position the UV map for our cup. There you go. Now we have a nice even UV all the way around. So the last thing I'm going to show is dealing with a non-uniform object, such as this one, where it's not exactly facing one axis. It's slightly facing a different direction. And that's not something that you could easily UV from just your regular orthographic perspective. Now you can, but the texture will appear a little bit too warped for our liking, especially if we've got a nice uniform texture that we want to slap onto it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to UV, and now we could do one of two things. We could either unwrap, or we could do a smart UV projection. Now I implore you to test them and see how they look. Like whenever I do unwrap, it looks pretty nice. It's actually exactly how I'd like it. The only thing is it's rotated 90 degrees. But you might want to try other methods, such as trying the smart UV projection and giving it an angle. Or in another sense, you could actually, by clicking this button on the right side under this camera, setting it to orthographic view yourself and lining up the shot, and then project from view like that too. I don't recommend doing that unless you're in a tight pinch. I recommend using the auto unwrapper if you have a simple object or a simple shape like this, where the face is pretty flat. But the option is there just in case. So here we want to make sure that everything is rotated. Just like before, you can hold down Control, just like in the last tutorial. You can hold down Control to rotate the shape in increments of 5 degrees. So we just want to rotate ours until it's right side up. So negative 90 degrees in our case. And then we can shrink it down. Oop. Just like that. And keep transforming it until it finally fits nice and snug. So what I'm trying to do is just even it out with everything around it. And there we go. Now, of course, you can do some more advanced posing for your ramen cup like I did in our preview at the start of these tutorials. But for the most part, these are all ready and set to go. Let's go back to our layout mode. Let's set our renderer so we can take a good look at it. There we go. All right, guys, just as before, I want to say big thanks to all of you guys for joining. Patreon names will be showing up on screen. And I want to say, absolutely, I can't say thank you enough for all of you guys who have encouraged me to do these tutorials. It's been a lot of fun stepping through this and wanting to teach this. And of course, trying to find a nice way to present it and offer it for free, and also find a way to offer it to Patreon so that those who do want to support can. So if you have any kind of positive criticisms about this, like hey, could you explain this a little bit more, or step through this a little bit better in a future tutorial, please leave a comment, let me know. As usual, if you model something based off these tutorials, whether it's a ramen cup or anything, and you just use these tutorials as a little bit of help, please feel free to show me. I would love to see it. And once again, thanks guys so much. I will catch you in the next tutorials, which should cover more advanced things like pre-band bass. Oh, wait, I just remembered. We forgot something. So for all of you guys who waited long enough, I am so sorry. But we are going to cover how to export UV maps. So let's say you've UV'd everything without a texture, right? What I want you to do is I want you to go into, I want you to make sure you have everything selected, all of your objects. I want you to go into edit mode on your UV editing profile. Make sure you have everything selected. Select all, and it's going to show you all of your UVs. Now, here's how you simply send a UV for editing. So you're going to go up to your UV tab. Once you have everything here, right? Everything's there. You're going to go up to UV. You're going to go to Export UV Layout. And this is going to bring up this prompt. So I'm going to just drop mine into our project folder. Let's see if we can actually find it. There it is. It's actually in my recents now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it ramen underscore UV. And I'm going to keep the format as PNG and keep the resolution. You can up the resolution if you need it, but that's how I'm going to do it. We're going to export the UV layout. That way, when we export it, we have this image. And of course, if you have something like, for instance, a sprite, you can quickly drop it in a sprite, draw over it, and then upload your texture like we showed before. So sorry I forgot to mention this earlier, but hey, at least I got it into the tutorial, the entire tutorial. But yeah, thank you guys so much once again. I will catch you all on the flip side. Peace, and yeah, keep an eye out for those advanced tutorials. They'll be here before you know it.